Welcome everybody to WebChat with Minnesota Adult Education. Today is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. Good to see you all for the first WebChat of this year. In our agenda today, we have several topics that we'll be discussing. We'll talk about, we'll give Literacy Action Network a chance to do a sponsor update. We also then have some announcements. We'll be talking about the fall manager meeting, doing some follow-up from that fall meeting. We'll be giving you some updates with grants and funding, talking about accountability and assessment, providing some transitions updates, as well as upcoming professional development opportunities. And then we'll make sure we have time for your questions. All right. Let's kick off with some introductions of our state adult education team. My name is Brad Haskamp. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the State Director of Adult Education working here at the Minnesota Department of Education. One of our team members is Astrid Leiden, our Professional Development Specialist. She is unable to be here today because she is traveling with her mother in India. So we're very glad that she has this wonderful opportunity to have this adventure with her mom. I'll turn it over to Brandy.
Hi, everyone. This is Brandy Logan. I'm the High School Equivalency and Accountability Specialist on the state team. And it's great to see everybody. And I'm going to turn it over to Haley.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this chilly Wednesday. My name is Haley Swanson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Grants and Records Admin Support Specialist with the team. And I am going to pass it over to Jody.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to see you. My name is Jody Versa. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Program Quality Specialist on the team, and I will pass it to Julie.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Dinko. I'm the Transition Specialist on the team. My pronouns are she, her, and I will pass it on to Neil Allard.
Hi folks, my name is Neil Allard. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the Records Communications and Admin Support Specialist.
Wonderful. So I really appreciate each of the team members for all of their work that they do every day, and also in preparation for today's web chat. So thank you all so much. What a wonderful team to be working with. Now I'm going to turn it over to Literacy Action Network to provide a sponsor update. So go ahead, Anne.
Hello, my name is Anne Trokel, and I am the Literacy Action Network President-elect. And we have a few updates for you today. We want to make sure that you are aware that the call for proposals for Summer Institute 2025 went out. It opened on February 1st, and we will close that call for proposals on March 31st. And I want to make sure you know, too, that there are 45-minute sessions at Summer Institute and 90-minute sessions. So take some time and think about how it is that you can share the amazing things that you do with your colleagues across the state. The LAN Award nominations is ongoing. And so also take a moment and think about the amazing work that your colleagues are doing or your students. The awards are, again, this year, Teacher of the Year, Outstanding Learner, ABE Leadership, the Todd Wagner Award for Outstanding Service and Achievement, ABE Advocate and Partner, and of course, Innovation. So those nominations are due by April 30th. Summer Institute this year is in person only. The pre-conference will be August 12th and 13th, and the conference will be August 13th through the 15th. And we will meet again at the Park Event Center in Waite Park, Minnesota. And on the LAN website, the hotel information is available. Next slide. We are hosting a webinar together with MN ABE, Atlas, and IM ABE on Friday afternoon, I believe it's a Friday, February 21st from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. This adult education check-in Q&A on federal funding and policy changes webinar will be a time for us to talk with each other, to respond and look at the survey results to a land survey that was done last week. And you can register for the webinar. I believe that you'll get it in the slides from this. And then, oh, I can see it's also in the chat for you. We are hosting the Day on the Hill on Tuesday, April 8th at the Rotunda at the Capitol. You're encouraged to attend and bring your students if possible. And if you would like to meet with your rep, you could reach out to Wendy at info@literacyactionnetwork.org, and she will help you connect with the legislative chairs and Sherry and see what we can do to help you connect with your rep if you are available that day. And then we want to remind you about the COABE Public Policy Pulse. This monthly newsletter has public policy developments. And if you are a current land member, you also have a COABE membership. And so again, if you need help with that, Wendy at info@literacyactionnetwork.org, or you can also go to the Literacy Action Network website. And always remember to check the MN ABE Connect newsletter for links to all of these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, Literacy Action Network, for hosting WebChat. And this is not unique. Literacy Action Network always has been hosting WebChat as part of their supplemental service grant. So thank you. As we go into announcements, I just want to acknowledge that we have received a lot of questions from the field about changes with federal announcements and federal government, and what does that mean for questions about how that is affecting your learners, how that might be affecting your programs, how that is affecting your communities. I really appreciate all of you sharing information and sharing questions with us. I acknowledge that we don't have a lot of clear answers yet at our level. We are working with leadership at the Minnesota Department of Education and with others nationally to try to get as much clear information as possible. At this point, there is not a lot of actual knowledge or clarity around or any in regards to changes to federal adult education or federal IELCE funding or grants or processes. I will admit, though, that our colleagues that we had been working with at the U.S. Department of Education at the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, the majority of them have been put on administrative leave, so we're not getting much of any information at this point in time from the U.S. Department of Education. As we do get clear information, we will definitely share that with you. Okay, but thank you for continuing to reach out to us with any questions you may have. I really appreciate the ideas and what you are sharing with us, and appreciate us being collaborative together and working together so that you can serve all eligible learners in your community at the best you can. And that is our core mission and what we hope to continue to do. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brandy Logan to talk about high school equivalency updates.
Thanks, Brad. So the first update that we wanted to share with the field is that the calendar reset. And so a lot of individuals that test with GED, they are used to a 60-day waiting period where an individual may take one test subject and on their third attempt fail. They have to wait a 60-day period. And so that is still true, but there's this nuance of the January 1st calendar reset, where if a student were in that 60-day waiting period and January 1st has come around, it resets. So they actually don't have to wait the remainder of the 60-day waiting period. We're not encouraging people to start pushing testing if the student isn't ready, but we felt that everyone should know that there was kind of this new calendar reset that not everybody understood with GED, including myself. So it was kind of new additional news. And so with that, HiSET has always been known to have a calendar reset as of January 1st as well. The difference between their testing to GEDs is that they only allow 3 attempts per calendar year. So if your student is currently taking HiSET or actively preparing for HiSET testing, they take a subject matter and they attempt it 3 times and fail, they will not get an opportunity to take that same subject matter until the next following calendar year. So that's the difference between the 2 test vendors. So just please keep an eye out and be very strategic with student testing. Next slide, please. This also goes into practice test pricing. So GED recently sent out information to everyone that their increase of their GED Ready voucher is going to go from $6.99 to $7.99, and that it becomes effective on March 3rd next month. This does not mean that, of course, programs still buying in bulk from GED Manager, your test vouchers would be at a lower price. And then also, if you have current GED Ready vouchers currently purchased, those will still stay valid. So just make sure that if you are wanting to purchase before the March 3rd deadline, then that is coming up. HiSET, their official practice test is still $2 per official practice test. And remember, that is through Essential Education. So if you have ever worked with HiSET, or if you haven't and you need to find where to locate those practice test vouchers, you can always reach out to me. Next slide, please. This made our team want to share just kind of an update on the total price cost when it comes to the differences between our test vendors. So when you're looking at the cost per test subject, when it's a practice GED or if it's a practice HiSET, that's $7.99 or $2. But then when you're looking at the actual test itself per subject is $36 for the GED. And then for HiSET, it's $23.75 if it's a computer in-person testing. It's $28 if it's a paper in-person testing, and it's $31.25 if it's an online proctored. So there comes a little difference in pricing, and we wanted everyone to be up to date on those. Those complete test batteries, it's just a solid $136 for the GED. And then on HiSET, it's $118.75 for the computer in person if they took all 5 subjects in person. It's $140 if they took all 5 subjects on paper in person, and it's $156.25 online proctored if all 5 subjects. Of course, if a student were to do a hybrid style test, those total prices may change, but then you could just add up the individual test subjects to get the total price. And then those retake prices are still $10 per GED or HiSET. Next, please. So this brings us to the subsidy information. We are looking at the allocated funds, which is that one-time additional funds to pay for total high school equivalency testing. And currently we have about 56% has been spent. So GED specific numbers, we were looking at from July 1st to current, we've had 10,297 vouchers used. And out of that 10,000, 1,195 were categorized as no-shows. And that is 12% of our total utilized vouchers. And that is lost voucher money. And so if you were to put that price equivalency to it, it's $43,020 that we've lost. So when I started to look at the data, I wanted to see which of these individuals of no-shows were affiliated with a test prep center. And it looks to be about 64.9% of those 1,195 are affiliated with a test prep center. And so roughly 776 total. And 33.5% are not affiliated with the test prep center. And there's about 1.3% of just outliers completely out of that total 1,195. And the reason we're sharing this information is because there is a way to combat this. And so if you go to the next slide, I have reached out specifically to our test vendors, and this is their direct language. For GED, if you have an emergency the day of testing, the tester needs to provide the reason for not showing up for the test and provide documentation. Once that happens, a case is opened and the request is reviewed and the determination is made. For HiSET, the test taker should be able to reschedule, and the system should recognize the proper fees if there has been sent an excused absence. So what we're wanting individuals to do at the program level, as well as your test centers, if you have a relationship with the tester, you find out they're a no-show, they contact you because there's an emergency. Let's get on the phone and contact their vendor and get that rescheduled for HiSET, or start the documentation so those voucher fees are not lost, and we kind of be proactive with the remainder of this allocated funds. And that's all I have. I'm going to pass it to Jody.
All right, thanks, Brandy. So I just want to make a quick announcement, quick reminder about the Adult Literacy Hotline, which I hope most of you are familiar with. Remember that this is the way that folks out in the community, potential students, community partners, this is how folks are finding your programs and your classes. And so we just want to remind you that the hotline information pulls directly from SID. And so periodically you or maybe someone on your staff should just be in the habit of look up your site's information on the hotline and check to make sure that it still looks good. You might need to adjust something in SID about particular classes or something like that. So mostly that is just a reminder. And then our team, our MDE team recently had our check-in with all of our support network providers. And when we were talking to the folks at Literacy Minnesota about the hotline and how things are going, there was one kind of concern brought up that we said we would communicate out to you all, to the field. And so the folks who answer the hotline are finding that recently there's been kind of an uptick in individuals who have called the hotline. They're asking for information about classes. The hotline operator will give them a phone number or contact information for an adult ed program. The potential student reaches out to that program and then later calls back to the hotline to say that nobody has gotten back to them. So no intention to call anybody out by any means. I think Caspian, who kind of has a lead role with the hotline at Literacy Minnesota, has done some digging and some research, and I think has reached out to some programs. And it seems like probably what's happening is that here in the metro area of the state, there are a lot of programs we know that our classes are full and you have wait lists, and there just may not be capacity to serve new students, which we understand, and that's a real issue. And we just wanted to put this concern out to the field, just because we don't want folks to be trying to contact your programs and not getting through. So mostly just consider it something, to check in with your front desk staff and just like have some conversations about how you're making sure that folks are, getting responses and getting the information that they need. So I think those are all of our announcements, and then I'm going to hand it back to Brad.
Thanks, Jody. And just, I should have said this earlier, we will try to address questions as they're brought up in the chat, but note that we will have questions, time for Q&A at the very end of the session today. So we might not be able to get to your question until the end, but don't worry, you'll get a chance to ask it when we get to that point. Let's follow up on the fall manager meeting. So first, thank you all for all of you that attended for all the active participation and great ideas and questions at the fall manager meeting. Thank you for all of that. That really was a rich conversation, a very collaborative day, and we really tried to switch the format so there was a lot less sit and get, and it was a lot more collaborative conversations and group problem solving. So thank you for all of your work. In the evaluation for the fall manager meeting, the majority of participants did indicate that they would like to see these fall manager meetings continue annually and in person. So, moving forward with that information, we have tentatively set the next date for the 2025 Fall Manager Meeting for Thursday, October 23rd, 2025. So you can mark your calendars now, and we will put that on all of the events calendars, and we'll send a save the date when we get closer to that event. But we've already have that date set for you for this fall. Then let's go to the next slide here. Here's a little bit of a reminder of what we talked about that day. So there were two major topics. One talking about service delivery models, and the second topic in the afternoon about program resources and outcomes. With service delivery models, we spent a good amount of time talking about the pilot period with the online statewide training courses and thinking about what does the future of those online statewide training courses look like, or what should it look like? And also we compared it to other online courses that are available locally, regionally, and statewide, and looking at those courses and models that exist throughout the state. In the afternoon, when we talked about program resources and outcomes, we gave an update on grants and funding, including MEGs, data and performance, accountability measures, a lot of those changes in the new documentation that we shared, federal statewide reports, walked through that statewide performance reports, and talking about policy and assessment, including changes to assessment and testing expectations. So that's a little bit of a run through in just a couple seconds of what we did that day. So I'll give you a second to kind of process that. Let's go to the end. Now let's follow up. We'll have Wendy launch a poll here, and we'd really like to hear from you. Now that we are a couple months since we've had this fall manager meeting, we're curious, what follow-up actions have you taken since the fall manager meeting? Have you acted on any of the information or ideas learned? Have you had any of the information or ideas learned help you in your role, or has that helped you in your program? Also, have you reached out to a colleague since the fall manager meeting to follow up on any conversations that happened that day? We'd love to hear from you. Just trying to get an honest response from folks about their participation and what's happened since with the fall manager meeting so that we can evaluate how the information worked for you. Give you a couple more minutes to answer. We have about 93 participants, and I think we have about 35 people that have responded thus far, I think. 38, 40, 35. We'd love to get as many responses as possible from you. We're currently at 49, 50. Of course, I hope that my MDE colleagues are not answering the poll to skew the results. If you haven't responded to the poll, please respond to the poll. We have about 69% of folks on the call that have responded so far. And don't worry on the poll, if you weren't at the fall manager meeting, you can just click I did not attend for each of those, and that is still helpful. I appreciate even those responses. That is helpful for us. Before we close it, I'd love to get to at least 75% of the folks on the call responding. And again, please be honest. Give you another 30 seconds. And then if you've already responded to the poll, please add in the chat. Share with us anything that you want to share about since the fall manager meeting that's you've been sitting with, that you've been working on, that you've been pondering, anything that's happened within your program or any questions that have lingered. Feel free to add any details in the chat. Okay, it's been 30 seconds. I haven't seen any new responses for a little bit here now. So I think we can close the chat or close the poll. Sorry, not the chat. All right. And so you can see there the responses. So the majority did say yes, that they have acted on information and or ideas shared or learned. And the majority did say that the information has helped them in their role and in their program. Okay. And then a slight majority have said that they have reached out to a colleague to continue a conversation from the fall manager meeting. That is really helpful to know. Good additional comments and perspectives in the chat. Thank you all. Excellent. Thank you for all of that information. That is really helpful for us as we think about finalize our evaluation for the fall manager meeting and as we look forward to this fall's fall manager meeting. Thank you all very much. I appreciate that. At this point, I'm going to turn it over on the next slide to Jody to share a little bit more about one aspect of the fall manager meeting. Jody.
Thanks, Brad. So yeah, we wanted to continue the conversation that we started at the fall manager meeting, thinking about online programming and how we can utilize it better at a statewide level. So first of all, we just want to kind of give you an update of sort of currently what is true and what is happening right now. So currently, as hopefully most of you know, there are a set of online statewide training courses. There are currently 4 of them that are funded. We set aside a little bit of federal adult education funding to support those 4 courses. They are MOS or Microsoft Office, PCA or personal care attendant, commercial driver's license, and paraprofessional. And we know many of you have really appreciated those courses. And we really also appreciated your feedback and the discussion we had about those courses at the fall manager meeting. And since then, we have made the decision to continue to fund that as a pilot project for at least 1 more year. So you can expect that there will be online statewide training courses, or there will be funding available to for programs to apply to offer some online statewide training courses during 25-26, during the upcoming school year. And we are also going to be partnering a little more closely with Atlas staff to help us coordinate the logistics of all of that. We heard you in the fall in the fact that some of the logistics and, just the organizing of those courses has been a little complicated and not parallel between the different courses. So we're going to be hoping to work on that. Just a note that we don't know for sure which courses will be offered in the upcoming year. It's not guaranteed to be the same set of courses that are currently being offered now, but we are still going to have the funding available to pilot those kind of courses. In addition, I'll pause for a second. Good question, Jen. Is there a timeline and process for applying to offer a statewide course? Yes, that timeline and process is embedded in the process of submitting a regional transitions plan. So if you and your program are interested in offering a course, you should connect with your regional transitions coordinator. And as they are working on a plan this spring, then you can sort of bring that to your region and propose and agree together as a region which courses you all would like to include in your regional transitions plan, or which courses you would like to apply for at the same time as you submit your plan. Good question. Also, in addition to those 4 courses, there is another kind of place to get some information about online statewide courses that honestly I think had fallen off our radar for many of us at the MDE team and probably a bunch of you out there. So we just want to kind of bring it back on everybody's radar again. There is a report in SID that will list any courses anywhere across the state that are tagged as career-focused online statewide. So the name of the report is that's the name of the report in SID. Anybody can run it who has access to SID, or maybe you have to have an admin login. I'm not sure. But anyway, it is in SID. And that report, so I pulled it recently, and thank you very much to a handful of you out there who I reached out to you because there was some question about a course of yours that was listed on that report. A bunch of you cleaned that up for me. Thank you so much. And I believe at this point that report should be a pretty accurate representation currently of current classes that are open, or current classes that are running, that are open to students statewide. And just know there are a few more on there that are not the 4 that are funded through the pilot. So we just wanted to remind people that that exists. The only difference is the courses that are funded through the pilot program, the home consortium or the referring consortium keeps those hours, so records those hours. If the other courses that are not funded that way, then the program that is teaching the class would count the hours. So the hours are a little bit differently, but all of those courses are open statewide for students. So we just want to make sure that that is something that folks are aware of and thinking of. Then I just want to sort of acknowledge what our team here at MDE is kind of thinking about and hoping to explore. But honestly, this is exploration that we as a statewide system can hopefully continue to discuss and talk about and brainstorm and move some of these things forward. So really kind of the questions we're asking are, how can online programming help serve students who need a specific class or a subject not offered by their local program? And some of these existing, those pilot courses, those online courses are already starting to do that in some cases. Also, how can online programming provide options when the local program has to put a new student on a waiting list? We know this is an issue currently, and it feels like an opportunity, a way that online programming could potentially be supportive. I don't think we've figured out the logistics and the nuts and bolts, but it is a question that is definitely out there. And also just in general, how can online programming support students who, for whatever reason, need or prefer to learn from home? So including, yeah, thank you, Erin, including folks who, for whatever disability reason or accessibility reason, online learning is a more accessible way to learn, potentially. Yes, agreed. So as we sort of ponder those questions, think about those questions, put those questions out there to you. On the next slide, we've got one thought or one idea that we are pursuing at the moment to kind of work towards expanding how our online statewide programming can be serving students. So one of the things we are looking at, and we have talked to the SID support folks and the hotline software developer folks, and we are considering adding additional capacity on the hotline so that folks could search for online classes in a way that's not limited by geography. Currently, you can search for online classes, but you still have to have the parameter of a distance. I think the farthest you can set is 100 miles. So that doesn't cover our whole state. So we are considering this adjustment to the search function in Hotline. As we do that, as we've talked about that, as we talked to the Hotline people, we realized that it doesn't make sense to make it so that any online class can be searched statewide, because we know many of you are offering courses that are online, but you do need your students, those students, to come in person to do an intake, orientation, maybe and a pre-test potentially, and maybe come back in person to post-test. So that kind of a class shouldn't be open statewide if you do have a requirement for your students to come in person. But we are hoping to explore a little bit for classes and programs that can truly do remote, that can serve students remotely entirely, including remote intake, remote testing, and remote instruction. We're looking at a way to try to make those kind of classes searchable for anybody who's looking at the Hotline. So mostly we consider this a heads up, hopefully getting your creative juices running as well in terms of, choices you are making locally, and just continuing to have this conversation as a statewide system. So we will continue to update you if and when there are changes that are made. We hope that you continue to engage with us and with Atlas and with, our whole system on working together on the question of online statewide programming. Then next, we are going to shift and talk about grants and funding. So I will hand it off to Julie, first of all, to tell us about IELCE.
Thank you, Jody. I just have one slide here and I'll turn it back to you. Hopefully the field knows and people are aware that the Integrated English Literacy and Civics Education, commonly referred to as the IELCE grant, is open. This RFP needs to be submitted by February 19th by 3 p.m. Central Time. And there is a link that you can click on to provide more information and all the documents that you need to submit the forms for this grant opportunity. Back to you, Jody.
All right. Thanks, Julie. So I want to just give everybody a reminder, small request for some of you. For this current fiscal year that we are in right now, so fiscal year 25, your federal adult education funds, your grant, which if you're into using UFARS codes is FIN code 438, that grant, those funds are flowing out through MEGS this year, which is a new grant system that replaced our older grant system of SERVS. So the first step in accessing those funds in MEGS is to create and submit a budget. Many of you have done that. Thank you so much. There are still some of our consortia, some of our grantees that do not yet have an approved budget in MEGS. I will note there are some grantees that have created a budget, but it has not been submitted to MDE for approval. So just a nudge to you. If you're not sure, if you work for the fiscal agent entity of your consortium, which I know not all of you do, so if you don't, don't worry too much. But if you are the consortium manager, please make sure that if you're not sure whether a budget has been submitted in MEGS, please check. And I think probably next week, Haley and I will start doing some individual reaching out to folks to give you an individual nudge, but this is just a group nudge today. So appreciate your action on that. And then the other thing to know about MEGS is that because these federal funds are now flowing through MEGS, we do have a somewhat tighter, stricter quarterly reimbursement request schedule. So basically, we need grantees starting in this current fiscal year to be more timely about requesting reimbursement for these federal funds. Some grantees have already done that, so thank you to those of you who work at programs who have already put in 1 or 2 reimbursement requests. That is great. Many of you out there work at programs that have not yet done this, which is also okay. This was a little bit of a last minute ask. We didn't have this information at the very beginning of the fiscal year, so we recognize that your business office may not yet have really wrapped their head around this, and that is okay. At this point, if a reimbursement request has not been made yet, that's fine. It can be made at any time. You could have somebody go in this week and request reimbursement for all of the expenses so far in the fiscal year. That would be fine. We are just basically asking for folks to get in the regular practice of every 3 months requesting reimbursement for the previous 3 months. So again, just a reminder about that, something that probably both Haley and I will continue to remind you about in the future. Then next, I just want to remind folks about narratives. As probably most of you know, the narrative is a long, extensive online application. It is the process we use to reauthorize all existing consortia to continue receiving state adult education funds for another 5, or currently it's usually 6 years. And then we kind of just give reminders every year of who's on board. Yeah, thanks. Next slide is fine. I know there's a group of you who are submitting in 2025, and you are well aware. So that is the group of consortia listed here on the left in the blue box. I know these folks, shout out to all of you who are doing a lot of work, writing documents, organizing things, and getting ready to submit your narrative on June 2nd of this year. For you all, the next step in the process is a couple of us from the MDE team will come out and do a site visit this summer or this fall to talk about your narrative. For a while, we were doing all of those site visits virtually, but we have now shifted back to doing them in person, which is really nice. We like to come out and visit. And then the other group of folks who are kind of on deck at this point is the group of consortia that are required to submit narratives in 2026. So that is the group that is listed in the blue box on the right of this slide. I did send out a reminder or an initial email to the consortium managers of this list of consortia. So if you are the manager of one of those consortia, you should have heard from me recently. So the first step in the narrative process is always to review narratives in the year before you have to submit. So if you work for one of these programs in this blue box here, you are, a team of staff from your consortia will be asked to read and review narratives in June of this year, the 2025 narratives. That'll happen throughout the month of June. And then on Tuesday, June 24th, we will have a full day reviewer meeting where we get together and talk about the narratives and score them together and put our comments together. That is a virtual workshop on Zoom. After June is finished, then you all kind of cannot think about the narrative too much for a while. You have sort of a couple months off. And then in October, on Tuesday, October 7th, we will have the Narrative Writers Workshop, which is really the kickoff for writing your narrative, which will then be due in June of 26. So just a reminder to all the folks involved, definitely reach out to me if you have any questions about that. Next reminder is just that we have every year your annual application for adult education funds is due on June 1st. This year, June 1st is a Sunday, so it's due on June 2nd. Remember that annual application is for both your state funds and your federal adult education funds. Like last year, that application will be submitted in MEGS, so it'll probably be relatively similar to last year. There might be some tweaks, but hopefully no big major changes. And we will tell you lots more information about that annual application at our next web chat, which will also be our annual grant application workshop, and that will be on May 7th. So just a heads up about that for now to make sure that's on your timeline, on your calendar, on your radar. So at this point, we want to take a little time to think through and talk through where we are at with contact hours and what we can know or think or try to figure out about state ABE funding for next year. I know that this is the time of year many of you who are in charge of doing budgets are trying your best to figure out how much funding you're looking at for next year and create a budget. So I just want to give you as much information as we have so for you to be able to use in your process of planning and budgeting and making your best guesses about next year. As we do that, I thought it kind of made sense actually to start with where are we at this year. So currently we're in FY25 and the calculation of funding for the current year is always based on the previous year's hours. So the hours from May 23 to April 24 are the hours that, and statewide, the count of hours in that time period was about 3.9 million. So that was what was used in the formula for this year. For this year, the total pot, the total amount that we started with to divide out to all the grantees was about 54 million. And the formula, the way that 54 million gets divided up is a pretty complicated formula. It has a bunch of factors and it also has a couple of caps or limits. And today I'm not going to get into all of that, but as you know, you're probably aware, the most influential or the most variable number in that whole formula is the contact hour rate. How much funding do you receive per contact hour? So for the current year, for those hours from May 23 to April 24, your award included $9.60 for each of those hours. Unless you hit one of the caps, which is a separate thing, we're not going to get into that today, but I know some of you are in that circumstance. So that's where we're starting. Here's where we are at this year. So statewide contact hours, this chart compares 8 months, so 2/3 of the year. It is comparing May to December of 23, which is what the numbers that were used in the formula for this year, and with May to December of 24. So that's the count of hours that's going to be used to determine your funding for next year. So as you can see, in that time period in 23, we had about 2.4 million hours statewide. In the same time period this year, there were about 2.6 million hours statewide. So that is an increase at this point of about 10% from this year as compared to, or sorry, from last year to this year. So this year compared to last year is a 10% increase. And this holds with what we've been seeing ever since the pandemic. So we had a big dip in hours in 1920, and then we've been slowly kind of climbing back out of that hole or back towards pre-pandemic levels. We are getting closer, and it looks like this year we are still in a trend of trending upwards. So I encourage you to do this same comparison in your program, or your consortium. Compare your hours from May to December 23 to May to December 24 and figure out what the rate of change is. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And remember, keep in mind, if you have more than a 10% increase, then that is predictive of an increase in your funding next year compared to this year. if you have less than a 10% increase, so if you're seeing more like a 2 or 3% increase, that is predictive possibly of a decrease in your funding from this year to next year. Of course, there are several other factors involved. It's not quite that simple, but just as a general rule, that's why it's important to know that statewide number. So now, looking ahead, thinking about next year, here are some things that we can either reasonably predict at this point. So we'll use hours from May 24 to April 25 in the formula to distribute funding for FY26. If that 10% increase that we were just talking about, if that holds for the last couple months of the year here, and if we're looking at overall a 10% increase from last year to this year, then we will end up a total of about 4.3 million hours statewide. We can also kind of make a guess at what the total pot of funding will be if current state statute, as defined in current state statute, we will most likely have somewhere between level funding, so exactly the same amount as this year, and up to a 3% increase. So that puts the total pot at somewhere between 54 and 56 million. So when you look at those numbers, what it is possible to say is that we are looking at a scenario where next year's contact hour rate will go down. So currently it is 960 this year. We are looking, if these numbers hold true, it will be lower than 960. I wish we could predict for you more exactly than that. We really can't. It's just too complicated and also just isn't prudent for us to try to do that. But that is what we can tell you about what, predictable outcome of the current scenario and the numbers that we're seeing at this point. But sort of the last caveat about this is just to make sure that one possible scenario is kind of on folks' radar as you think about state funding for next year. So you may or may not know that there is currently bill language being worked on at our state legislature that would increase the total amount of state ABE funding, maybe to about 65,000, roughly an increase of 10 million for our system as a whole, which is almost a 20% increase. That I won't speculate on the possibility of whether or not that language makes it into state statute, but it's currently in the process. It's currently being proposed. If that were to happen, then this changes the math significantly. And in this scenario, the contact hour rate would definitely be higher than 960. An important thing to note is that part of this proposal is to lift the growth cap for 1 year. So currently there is a cap that you can't receive more than 11% increase in contact hour revenue. This proposal sort of puts the cap aside for 1 year to allow everyone to capture as much growth or increase as would be possible in the formula. And this would be a permanent reset of the base annual amount. So it would not be just you get a whole bunch extra 1 year and then go back. It would actually kind of reset where the base amount that we get every year. And then from there, the following year, we would start with that new base and increase somewhere between 0 to 3% as current state statute says. So if this were to happen, it could happen very last minute, which is why we wanted to make sure that it is on your radar because the legislature, if you've been following it all, the state legislature is kind of wild this year. It's likely that they might go long and might need a special session. So it's possible that this could be a possibility up until sometime in May, sometime in June. And we are talking about the award amount for the fiscal year that starts July 1. So we just don't want anybody to be caught entirely by surprise by this. Just kind of have it in your back pocket. What would you do if you got a big bump in your award next year? If you're interested in advocacy about this, either you want to advocate for this or you want to advocate against this, you can definitely connect with Literacy Action Network or LAN. They're the ones who are keeping tabs on what's happening at the legislature. Yep. Thanks, Neil. You can go to the next slide. So I will wrap up by saying that the next opportunity for you to talk some more about this issue will be on February 26th, when our friends at Atlas are going to host a webinar that'll be a lot more, interaction and potential sort of work time, thinking and planning and talking with others about how you are budgeting for the upcoming year. Oh, and just briefly before I pass it on, I will say that we, at this point, I don't usually talk about the federal amount or federal contact hour rate because it's so much smaller than the state amount, that we're usually more focused on the state ABE funding. But I will say we are, at this point, we don't know of any changes in the amount of federal funding that will be available. So at this point, we are predicting, or the best prediction we have is that the federal amount would be similar to what it is for the current year. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Brad.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Jody. Let's talk briefly about accountability and assessment updates. First, this is another follow-up from the fall manager meeting. So remember, for our program improvement policy and report card and assessment policy, the current expectation has been 60% of participants, those with 12+ hours that year, are expected to have a valid post-test. Based on your input, we are going to make changes to the program improvement policy and to the report card for next year that will adapt those expectations to 60% of those participants with 12+ hours who have not already earned an MSG 1D, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So if they've earned a non-NRS test-based MSG already, they will be excluded from those from those post-testing expectations. So I'll just clarify that on the next slide. So remember, these are the other types of MSGs that would not involve pre and post testing. 1D is about passing a single high school equivalency assessment. 2 is about earning a diploma. 3, 4, and 5 are for IET programs. 4 can also include employer-based or workplace literacy programs. So if a learner has one of those other types of MSGs, they're excluded from the post-testing expectations. And I see in the chat, someone's asking, where does 12 hours come from? 12+ hours is part of our federal definition of what defines a participant versus an enrollee. Let's go to the next slide. So you can see here then in the next year's, in this 2025 report card, this is what you'll see change is that you'll see these, the post-testing expectations removed for those students who have earned another type of measurable skill gain. So stay tuned. We are, thanks to the SID staff for helping to make those changes happen for the report card. There are also some updates with tests. So TABE 13 and 14 has been approved by the federal government for use for the National Reporting System. Spark is obtaining the information from Data Recognition Corp, and we are reviewing that TABE 13 information to make an official recommendation to MDE. This also includes work that they're doing with the SID staff to make sure that they can get the test information loaded accurately, that we have all the information we need for the assessment policy, etc. So if and when TABE 1314 is approved in Minnesota for adult education programs and set up in SID, we at MDE will send an announcement to all of you to let you know that that test is now approved and available for NRS purposes. Let's go on. And then similarly, there are new tests for CASA's reading. So with CASA's reading goals 1, That test is currently set to sunset on June 30th, 2025. If that sunset period gets extended, we will send you an announcement to let you know about that extension. We're also waiting to see if and when CASA's Reading Goals 2 will be approved, so that we have more of a transition time. So that we do know that CASA's did submit that to the federal government for review and approval, but it has not yet been approved federally. When CASA's Reading Goals 2 gets approved, we will work with Spark to look at the review and potential recommendations. So stay tuned on that. And then we've also had folks ask, well, how can I find those federal reports, those statewide federal reports? So in the chat, you'll see the links, but there's a way to look up any federally reviewed reports for all states. You can see that's our National Reporting System website. You can see all of the reports, and you can see Minnesota specific reports. And again, these are statewide reports that we are required to submit. Note that these reports that we submit to the federal government do not include individual level data. I see in the chat someone's asking, is it advisable to purchase TABE 1314 now before it is approved? We cannot recommend buying any test before it's officially approved. But we understand that different programs have different budgetary considerations and things to consider. I will say I would be very surprised if TABE 1314 is not approved within the next couple months. So that would just be my what I know at this point in time.
Brad, isn't the timeline for like the CASAS reading normally longer than, did you say June 25 for the sunset of CASAS goals reading and the other one's not approved yet?
Correct. Yep. And that is where the federal government is currently at. And I've asked for clarification, and they don't have any further clarification at this point in time. All right. We'll hold questions till the end. We're running short on time here, but at this point, we'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Brandy to talk about data.
Thanks so much. So we just wanted to kind of do a update, or just kind of allow people to know what's going on when we do our accountability and intaking. So as you can see on the screen here, this is a lot of information that's collected as your students enroll into your programs. And as you can see, Social Security numbers, as well as employment status and barriers to employment, are bolded because some of those additional markers is what we use to create a lot of those tables and reflection of what our state's doing, as Brad had mentioned on the screen prior at the NRS reporting. So if you look at the next screen, this was shared at the managers meeting. But in program year 24, our barriers to employment that are reported, you can see the percentage based off the population. And if you look in that row 2 of English language learners, that's the total enrollment, 34,760 individuals. And so if it's in red, that means that it was lower than previous program year in reporting. And so you can see those percentages that were a dip from the previous program year. And then the next slide shows program year 23 as well, with a dip in certain areas highlighted in red, with a population size of 29,845. And the reason that we show this leads to the next slide, showing that there's been an increase in our enrollment growth for the past 2 program years, over 19% each year. So our enrollment for PY 21 to 22 is highlighted, as well as 22 to 23, and then 23 to 24. But if you look at that percentage, we're only having around 55% of our population reporting or giving their Social Security numbers, which again, we use those markers to help identify students for additional reports when we upload to NRS. And so our enrollment growth is growing at a 19%, but we're having a negative 3% decrease in obtaining Social Security numbers. And of course, this was all reports based off of 12 plus hours pre-test, no corrections and no exempt students. So then that way we can kind of keep those numbers clean. We just wanted to highlight the difference and just kind of advocate about working with students to assist in getting social security numbers as well as additional information, or if you're having to go back and revise their SID intakes. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you, Brandy. And then finally, another follow-up from the fall manager meeting. There was questions about what is our guidance regarding collecting barriers to employment and data from students in general. So we acknowledge that collecting a lot of this data, including the barriers to employment, can be sensitive, and it requires a respectful private conversation in many cases. We ask that programs that you examine your process. How are you collecting this information? And how can you make sure that you're doing this with respect, securely, and accurately? And note that if a learner acknowledges that they meet the definition of a barrier, but they don't necessarily agree with the title of the barrier. I know like homeless has been brought up as an example, but they might meet the definition of homeless, but they don't like to check that they're homeless. The program can deter if the program hears the student admit that they or say that they do meet the definition of homeless, you can mark that barrier for that learner in SID. So that is a clarification on that message as well. I just wanted to follow up with that from the fall manager meeting. Then let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Julie to talk about transitions.
Thank you, Brad. And we'll move right into the next slide. And this is talking about some confusion over integrated education and training and what funds can be used to support the training portion of integrated education and training. And so programs, most programs, not all of them, receive federal adult education formula funds. We refer to them as FIN 438. And because those are federal funds, if you use those funds to pay for training, it must be a part of an integrated education and training program. In addition, if you use federal funds known as FIN 801, IELCE, that's the grant that's open, and you use those funds to pay for the training portion of an IET or the training, then those also must be, you must use the federal funds for that. If you're using state funds to pay for the training, if you're using other grant funds, such as Pathways to Prosperity grants, those do not require that you use any sort of IET in that model. So I'll try to explain a little bit further if you go to the next slide. So workforce training is federally defined on this slide, and it includes occupational skills training, on the job training, incumbent worker training, job readiness training, transitional jobs, entrepreneurial training, skills upgrade, and customized training. It's important to realize that each of these types of training also have a federal definition attached to them. For instance, many of these trainings are offered by our WIOA Title I partners. For instance, adult and dislocated worker provide transitional jobs and on-the-job workforce training. However, the most common training offered by adult education by far is occupational skills training. And the next slide defines, that's the federal definition of what is occupational skills training. And I won't read this entire slide, but what's important to pull out of here is that a lot of people have the assumption that if you offer an integrated education and training program, or if you use that approach, then you have to offer a recognized post-secondary credential within that training. That is not correct. The training, the IET must be embedded in an adult career pathway that ends with a recognized post-secondary credential. In this definition, I have highlighted in yellow where it points that out. It says it must lead to the attainment of a recognized post-secondary credential. And so I hope that clarifies for many of you that an IET does not have to end in a recognized post-secondary credential. So next slide, please. All right. So what should you do? So your consortia is offering training. The first thing you should do is find out which funds are paying for this training. Probably the easiest thing to do is, if you're using federal funds, switch it to state funds. If that's not a possibility, you might want to look at the training you're offering and how can you embed that into an integrated education and training program. And if you look at that training and you think, oh, you know what, we already have all the pieces of an IET here, you simply need to complete the IET approval form and get it approved, and you're good to go. Next slide, please. So if you are unsure if you have an IET, you can always contact me. But I realize that there are a lot of questions in the field, a lot of new people in our field, new managers in our field that are not sure about what is integrated education and training. And I want to take this opportunity to really highlight that during this next fall, or probably summer, fall, Atlas will be hosting an IET academy that will provide professional development and technical assistance. So we want you to watch for more information on this, and we want you to try to budget accordingly to be able to send individuals to that training. And so the next slide will kind of talk a little bit about, well, what do you mean by budget accordingly? Well, using regional transitions funding, you can help support sending people to this IET Academy. That's just one thing to kind of store in the back of your mind. But the regional transitions plans will be available to the RTCs in early March. Each region receives $50,000. If you have ideas about like ways that some idea you want to pilot, you can talk to your regional transitions coordinator. But please remember to keep these ideas regional. The whole idea of a regional model is because this type of work, we cannot afford to do this individually by consortia. We have to work together in order to offer a lot of this type of training. Think of regional online classes as part of what should be offered with the regional transitions plans. These plans will be due April 11th. And as Jody had mentioned earlier, just keep in mind that this is also the time when, if you're interested, you can apply for to offer an online statewide training course. That's separate funding from the $50,000. I just want to highlight the priority areas this year will be, again, revisions to the Atlas Adult Career Pathway course curricula. If you have revisions that need to be made, you can use this pot of funding to pay an individual or several individuals to work on those revisions. We'd like to see a focus on increasing co-enrollment with WIOA Title I. That's adult, youth, and dislocated worker. We also would like to see a promotion of workplace education in the development of measurable skill gains, MSG4. That's the milestones gain. And we'd also like people to work on the development of a clear visual training for pathways to post-secondary credit. And that's to help learners really understand, if I'm in this English language acquisition class, but I really want to become a registered nurse, what are my steps and how do I get there? And what amount of time will it take? And then also you can use these funds to participate in the IET Academy. Next slide. If you have received a P2 Pathways to Prosperity grant, that's what a P2P grant is. This is offered through DEED. It is state funding. ABE is a required partner for, I believe, 2 of the grants. And so it's a great way to incentivize collaboration with our workforce partners and other training providers. This is the year, if they receive funding through the legislation, they'll probably try to be getting that grant opportunity out as soon as possible. So if you have not applied for this grant in the past and you're thinking about applying, now would be the time to get some general idea of what you might want to apply for. And the next slide, I want to remind people that there was a Transitions 101 webinar in early January. And this is really for those that not only are new to transitions, but those that might need a refresher, or it's just good review for anyone. And what's really great about this is that if 90 minutes is too long for people to sit down and watch a webinar, and oftentimes it is, it's broken down into chunks, like bite-sized chunks of like credentials or IET or adult career pathways. So you can watch just a segment on that. So this would be great to embed in any professional opportunities you offer locally, or just to review, you know, as people can. Next slide, please. If you have bookmarked the ABE interactive map, this has changed. There's a new link. It's been updated. And just to remind people that this is a great map to help you determine which partners are located within your consortium boundaries and who you should be collaborating with. Next slide. And then just a reminder for those of you that don't already know, MinnesotaWork.net is moving to CareerForce. This is a job, employers can post job openings on this website, and people seeking jobs can find jobs on this website. This will be moving to CareerForce, and more information will be coming soon. If you're not familiar with MinnesotaWorks.net, there's a link that has a brochure that explains everything they have in there. And the next slide just gives you an overview of what they're working on as far as moving this into CareerForce and moving it away from MinnesotaWorks.net. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, I don't know if it's Brad or Patsy.
That's me. Thanks, everyone. I'm Patsy, and I direct Atlas, and I just have a handful of professional development announcements for you. The first of which is an administrator webinar coming up very related to some of the topics on today's web chat. So this is our annual budgeting webinar, and it's going to be February 26th. And thanks, Neil, for dropping the link in the chat. And then I'm going to have Lindsay come on and speak about this next activity. We are hoping to get some information from you. Lindsay?
Yes, so we've received regular feedback that more in-person networking time with fellow managers is a need and a desire. So Atlas would like to respond by planning a manager retreat, but we want to make it worthwhile and effective, so we need your feedback. So please click on that link and provide feedback. It shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 minutes, and this will let us know how you would like us to use that time, or if we should even plan one at all. So thank you in advance.
Thank you, Lindsay. Also coming up, we are recruiting for a number of our different professional development advisory teams, and these are statewide teams that inform all of the professional development that we offer around the state. The ones that are recruiting this year include the administrator PD team, the transitions, and that includes adult career pathways and IET, language and literacy or LATE, and also the distance learning and PANDA teams are recruiting new people for those teams. This is a really key part of how we develop our offerings to the field, and if you or someone on your staff is interested, please look for those applications. They'll be available in early April, and it'll be in the newsletter. We also want to let you know that we have now consolidated all the Canvas courses. So Canvas, of course, is our learning management platform, and we have a number of courses available for professional development. They are all now available at this one link that Neil just dropped. Thank you. And it's just a nice place to go for all the courses that we currently have available. And one that I want to highlight on the next slide is from Panda. And this one is on universal design for learning. So that one was in that link that Neil just dropped, but also just a heads up that this one is available. It's new and something you definitely might want to check out. And we'll be offering some more information about Panda and universal design for learning at our April conference as well. Speaking of which, that conference is April 11th. It'll be from 8:30 to 3:15, a number of concurrent sessions. Registration will open on March 25th. This is virtual, so join us from anywhere in the state. And it is in lieu of having an in-person conference this time of year. So we had a North Regional, a South Regional, language and literacy was in person, and now we are offering a statewide virtual conference coming up in April that you definitely won't want to miss. So please pass that word along to your contacts. And I just mentioned that Spring South Regional, that's coming up on May 2nd. We'll again be at the Country Inn and Suites in Mankato. Registration opening for that on April 8th. So look, if you're in the southern part of the state, we hope to see you there. And just finally, a handful of PD dates to keep in mind. The North Regional will be in October. The Fall Manager Meeting was already mentioned. We have a special guest, Pam Harris, is a national speaker on math topics who we tried to get her this year and she was already booked. So we have booked her for this coming November. We're very glad she's able to join us. And then a number of other conferences. We've also just identified a date for Language and Literacy Institute, which will be next January. That one will be virtual. We flip between virtual and in person every year. The Spring Metro Regional, we are looking at the 17th of April next year. The MCTM, that's a math conference, is in Duluth next April 23rd through 25th. And then we're hoping, I know you all are working on your schedules for the coming year, so we're trying to get these dates out as quickly as possible. Tentatively, please hold if you're in the south part of the state, May 1st for the South Regional. And I'll turn it back to Brad.
Excellent. Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, Patsy and Lindsay, both for substituting for Astrid today and providing all those important professional development updates. Thank you. All of the materials for today's web chat, including the recording, will be posted on the Literacy Action Network website, so you can find it there. There's also a link in the chat. Thank you, Neil. Our next web chat is also our annual Adult Education Grant Application webinar. It's Wednesday, May 7th from 1 to 2:30. There's a link in the chat to register for that next web chat. So we hope to see you there. And thank you all for all the amazing work that you do to serve all eligible learners and adults in the States, and for serving your communities so well. Thank you so much for everything that you do, for all the ideas and the collaboration that just make adult education such a unique and positive system. I'm so happy to be a part of this work and to be colleagues with all of you. So here's our contact information, and then let's end the recording now.